is prove this is a criminal organization and that Tekashi is a part of it for these charges to stick. And over the last year, Tekashi has built a brand around being a blood, specifically Treyway, and we saw Tekashi go into the Breakfast Club right before he was arrested. In that interview, he claimed, Treyway was something he just made up, didn't have anything to do with the gang. He also said that he fired everyone on his team, that he isn't affiliated with them. So Tekashi may have seen this coming, but it looks like it might be too late. Tekashi is facing 32 years to life in prison, and it's honestly going to take a miracle for him to dodge these charges. Now here's another infamous case very similar to Tekashi's. I'm sure most of you guys remember when Bobby exploded onto the scene with his track Hot Boy. Alright, that's what the censored version's called. Back in 2014, Bobby blew up almost overnight. He landed a deal with Epic Records. His future was looking pretty bright until late 2017 when Bobby and 14 others were arrested. Bobby was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, reckless endangerment, and drug and gun possession, while other members of his crew had charges including murder, attempted murder, assault, and drug dealing. And with these charges, Bobby faced 8 to 25 years in prison. And what's so crazy about this case that's so similar to Tekashi's is that the police have been watching Bobby and his crew for years prior to him ever being famous. They've been stacking evidence and building a case without them ever knowing, and it's because of this that when the feds struck and they had enough evidence to put Bobby away no matter what, which is why I don't have a lot of hope in the Tekashi case. Now Bobby ended up taking a plea deal and pleading guilty to 1 count of third-degree conspiracy and 1 count of weapon possessions, leading to a 7-year sentence that he's still serving today. But on the bright side, compared to everyone else on this list so far, Bobby should be a free man within the next couple of years. Similar to Suge Knight, Gucci was no stranger to jail throughout the years, but there was a couple of cases in particular that could have led to Gucci facing 20 years to life in prison. The first one was back in 2005. Right when Gucci was dropping his debut album Trap House, he turned himself into police when a body was found behind a middle school, and Gucci was then charged with murder. So this is what happened. While Gucci was at some chick's house, 5 men, 3 of them dressed in all black, busted into the apartment and began threatening to shoot Gucci, punching him and pistol whipping his friend. Gucci then fired shots in self-defense, killing one of the attackers whose body was found behind a middle school. Now, of course, with a murder charge, Gucci was facing serious jail time, but surprisingly, the charges ended up being dropped due to insufficient evidence. Now, Gucci claimed self-defense and he even had a witness that was there that backed up his story. But there was an even more recent case that almost landed Gucci a 20-year sentence. This was back in 2013 when a friend of Gucci's actually called the police for help because apparently Gucci was acting erratic and crazy. When the police showed up, they ended up finding weed and a handgun on him, and obviously cops finding weed in the gun is never a good thing, but it was even worse for Gucci because he was a convicted felon, and this is what led to Gucci facing 20 years in prison. Now, Gucci ended up being charged with 2 counts of possession of a firearm as a felon, and once again, surprisingly, Gucci was able to get a plea deal where he pled guilty to possession of the firearm and only had to serve 3 years in prison, with him being released back in May 2016. Lil Boosie, also known as Boosie Badazz, could have faced the death penalty. Now, Boosie has had a string of run-ins with the law throughout his career, but it was in 2010 that Boosie faced potential life in prison or the death penalty when he was indicted on federal charges of first-degree murder of Terry Boyd. He was also facing charges for 3 counts of possession with intent to sell narcotics and 2 counts of conspiracy to introduce contraband into a penal institution. And it was in 2011 that Boosie pled guilty to the drug charges, and he was sentenced to 8 years in prison with the murder case still pending. Now, luckily for Boosie, he got a few breaks along the way. In 2012, he was found not guilty of that first-degree murder charge, and also in 2012, Boosie's lawyers were able to argue that the drug ring charges were set up because an informant offered to give Boosie some purple drink, which Boosie admits he was addicted to, in exchange for his help. And it was because of this that Boosie was able to get out of prison early back in March of 2014. Nowadays, Snoop is known as the laid-back, pothead uncle to everyone in the rap game, but it seems like a lot of people forget that back in 1993, before Snoop dropped his debut album Doggy Style, he was facing serious time in prison for first and second-degree murder charges. Apparently, Snoop and his bodyguard got into an altercation with a supposed rival gang member, and that altercation led to Snoop's bodyguard shooting and killing a guy named Philip Waldermerum. Now, although Snoop didn't fire the shot himself, he was driving the car they were in, so he was also hit with murder charges. The case lasted multiple years, and it wasn't until 1996 that both Snoop and his bodyguard were acquitted of the murder charges. But the battle wasn't over for Snoop because he ended up being tried for voluntary manslaughter and accessory to murder, but both of those charges ended in a mistrial. Now, what's interesting about this is that on Snoop's debut album Doggy Style, he had the infamous song Murder Was the Case, but he actually made that song before he ever actually caught the case. And Snoop has spoke about this, saying that he felt like making that song spoke that case into existence, and that's something that he tries to avoid doing now. Similar to Snoop, with Jay-Z being so solidified in the game, it's crazy to think that at one point earlier in his career, he was facing 15 years in prison. So this went down back in 1999. Jay-Z was attending Q-Tip's solo album release party, and at the time, Jay-Z believed that record executive Un was behind the bootlegging of his album Volume 3, and he confronted him about it at this party, allegedly stabbing him. Jay-Z ended up surrendering himself to police the next day, and he was placed under house arrest, and that's where he was facing 15 years in prison. Now, Jay-Z ended up hiring a lawyer, Murray Richmond, and he was known as a lawyer for prominent mobsters in the 70s and the 80s. And this lawyer was able to work a little bit of magic and got Jay-Z a plea deal, with him only serving 3 years of probation instead of the 15-year sentence. So Jay-Z pled guilty to third-degree assault, took a plea deal, and was able to remain a free man. And honestly, I can't imagine what rap would look like today if Jay-Z ended up being in prison for 15 years. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure you drop a like on it, subscribe to the channel if you guys are new, and of course turn on those notifications, man. It's been Lyrical Ub. I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.